I'm Brigadier General Sarah Kincaid. I'm 49 years old and I built my career one deployment, one promotion board, one sleepless night at a time. For years, I gave my father's second wife every benefit of the doubt, every dollar I could spare, every ounce of patience I had left after a 16-hour shift. But the night she grabbed a piece of my family's history off my dress in front of 200 strangers and called me a thief, something in me, finally, quietly, broke open. Have you ever given everything to someone who decided you still weren't enough? If you have, you're not alone, and I hope by the end of this you'll feel a little less alone too. Before I tell you what happened, tell me where you're listening from tonight, and if you've ever had to stand your ground after being disrespected by someone who was supposed to love you, hit like and subscribe, because this channel is for people learning that boundaries aren't cruelty, they're survival. What came after that night at the gala is not what you're expecting. I grew up in a two-bay garage that smelled like motor oil and burnt coffee. My father, Daniel Kincaid, ran that garage himself, 6 days a week, his knuckles permanently scraped, his back a little more bent every year from leaning under hoods. My mother died when I was 7. Cancer, fast and merciless, the kind that doesn't give you time to prepare, only time to grieve badly. After that, it was just the two of us, and we didn't talk about feelings much. We talked about torque specs and oil changes and getting the Henderson's truck back to them by Friday. That was our language. Showing up. Fixing what was broken. Not making a big deal out of things that mattered too much to put into words. I didn't join the military the way people expect. I went to college first, on scholarship, engineering, and it was there that a recruiter for Army ROTC caught me between classes and asked if I'd ever thought about leading soldiers. I hadn't. But something about the structure of it, the clarity of it, called to something in me that had been quietly starving since I was 7 years old. I commissioned as a second lieutenant at 22, the same week my father closed the garage early so he could drive 4 hours to watch. He wore his one good shirt, ironed stiff, and he shook my hand instead of hugging me, because that was how we did things. But I saw his eyes, and I understood. I made captain at 28 after 2 deployments and a logistics assignment that taught me more about leadership under pressure than any classroom ever could. The Army became the shape of my life. It gave me purpose, a chain of command that made sense, a family of sorts built out of people who'd bled and sweated beside me. My father understood that kind of devotion. He had given his whole life to an engine bay the way I gave mine to a formation. We didn't need to explain that to each other. There was one thing about me my father learned to respect. Even if he didn't always understand it, I never talked about rank at home. Not out of shame. Never that. It was something else. A kind of discipline I'd built for myself early on, a wall between the version of me that gave orders and the version of me that just wanted to be somebody's daughter for a weekend. Whatever happens at the unit stays at the unit, I told him once, half joking, after I made captain. Here, I'm just Sarah. He nodded like it made perfect sense, because to him it did. He was the same way about the garage. He didn't bring his frustrations with difficult customers home either. It was a small thing, that habit of mine. I didn't know yet how much it would matter later, how much room it would leave for someone else to fill in the blanks about who I was. That's when he met Renee. I was at Fort Campbell, deep into a training rotation, when he mentioned her for the first time in an email. Started seeing someone from church. Her name's Renee. Thought you should know. No details, no fanfare, which was exactly like him. By the time I got leave 4 months later, she was already folded into his routine. Her coffee mug in the cabinet, her sweater on the back of his recliner. Renee was 44 then, 12 years younger than my father, with a way of dressing that seemed just slightly too polished for a woman dating a mechanic on a fixed income. But she was warm to me at dinner that first night, asking real questions about deployments, about what it was like leading soldiers as a woman, listening like she actually cared about the answers. Your father talks about you all the time, she said, refilling my water glass without being asked. I feel like I already know you. I'm so glad to finally meet you properly. It felt genuine. I wanted it to be genuine. My dad had spent 9 years alone after my mother died, never once complaining, never once asking the world for more than what he'd built with his own 2 hands. If Renee made him laugh again, if she made the house smell like something other than solitude, that was enough for me. I told myself I would be the kind of daughter who made room, who didn't get in the way of her father's second chance at happiness. So when Renee started coming to Sunday dinners, when she moved into the house a year later, I welcomed it the way you welcome weather you can't control but decide to make peace with anyway. I spent a week of leave helping them retile the kitchen. I brought gifts when I visited. I tried. The first time I sent money, my father had a heart procedure that insurance covered only partway. There were follow-up visits, medication, physical therapy that added up faster than his retirement fund could absorb. I didn't hesitate. I wired $4,000 and told him not to worry about paying it back. Renee called to thank me, her voice thick with something that sounded like gratitude. "You're a blessing, Sarah. I don't know what we'd have done without you." A few months later, it was the roof, then the water heater. Then my father's old truck needed a transmission it couldn't survive without. Each time I helped. It wasn't charity. It was family. That's what you do. You show up, you fix what's broken, you don't keep a ledger. Renee started introducing me to her friends at church potlucks and holiday parties. "This is my stepdaughter," she'd say, gesturing toward me with a rehearsed smile. "She's in the army. Never a rank, never a unit, just fake enough to sound impressive without inviting follow-up questions she couldn't answer." Her friends would nod politely and ask surface-level things. Was it scary? Did I get to travel? Before the conversation drifted somewhere Renee could shine again. I made major at 35, after a brutal rotation running logistics for a joint task force overseas. The promotion came with a coin from my commanding officer that my father framed and hung above his workbench, right next to a photo of my mother. Renee threw a small gathering for it, invited her circle, and spent most of the evening telling anyone who'd listen how she'd always pushed Sarah to go far. My father glanced at me across the room. I saw the question in his eyes. I shook my head slightly. It wasn't worth correcting. Let her have the story. It cost me nothing, I told myself. I was wrong about that, but it would take years to understand how wrong. Over the following seasons, I settled into a rhythm, visiting when duty allowed, helping where I could, keeping things with Renee polite and functional on the surface. She'd softened in some ways, grown more comfortable in her role as my father's partner, but there was also a shift I couldn't quite name at first, a tightening in her tone, an edge that hadn't been there in the beginning. "You work too much, Sarah," she'd say. "Don't officers burn out?" Or, when duty kept me from making it home for something minor, "You should be helping your father more. He's not getting any younger." She began rewriting small histories in casual conversation, revising who had done what. When people asked how my father recovered so well after his heart procedure, she'd say she handled everything, minimizing what I'd actually contributed, the money the leave I'd burned, the calls I made from a tent halfway around the world to check on him. I told myself it was insecurity. She was still finding her footing in a family that wasn't originally hers. I gave her the grace I would have wanted given to me. When I made lieutenant colonel at 40, after coordinating a multinational exercise that required more diplomacy than I'd ever needed on a battlefield, Renee called her sister before I'd even told my closest friend. She framed it as a family triumph, told everyone she'd always believed in me. My father didn't correct her. He just looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with his age. By then, Renee had built a new social circle. Mostly women married to local business owners, women whose approval mattered to her in ways I never fully understood. She talked about home renovations and weekend trips with a casualness that didn't match my father's fixed income. When people asked how they managed it, she'd smile and say something vague about family support, which meant me. She started commenting on how I dressed off-duty, how my ribbons made me look like I was showing off. "People don't need to see all that," she said once at a 4th of July barbecue in front of her friends. "It's a bit much, don't you think?" I started wearing civilian clothes more often when I visited. I told myself it was no big deal. It was a big deal. I just didn't have the vocabulary for it yet. Then came the first comment about the pin. It was small. A round enamel disc, no bigger than a quarter, the deep red and blue of its ribbon miniature framed in gold, a single silver star at its center. It had been my great-grandmother's before it was mine, passed down through the women in my mother's family, worn on formal blazers and church dresses for 3 generations. My grandfather earned the medal it represented during the Korean War, pulling 2 wounded men from a collapsing position under fire before he was hit himself. He didn't die that day, but he never fully recovered, and he passed when my mother was young. The medal itself, the full silver star, the ribbon around the neck, all of it, stayed in a shadow box in my father's den, exactly where it belonged. But there is also officially a small lapel button version of every combat decoration this country awards meant to be worn on civilian clothing so a family can carry a piece of that sacrifice quietly, without needing to display the full medal. My great-grandmother had a jeweler set hers into a simple gold pin back in the 1950s, something small enough to wear to church without drawing attention, and it had been handed down to the eldest daughter of each generation ever since. It came to me the year I turned 30, at my mother's grave, from my aunt, who had no daughters of her own. I wore it on formal occasions, not often, but when it mattered. Renee saw me wearing it at a family gathering and pulled me aside. "People are going to think that's fake," she said quietly. "You should probably leave it at home." I stared at her. "It was my great-grandmother's. It's real." "I know, I'm just saying. It looks expensive. People might get the wrong idea." My father overheard. He didn't say anything, but his jaw tightened and he walked outside without a word. I should have said something then. I should have drawn a line right there in the doorway. But I didn't want to create conflict. I didn't want to make my father choose between the woman he loved and the daughter he'd raised, so I let it go, filed it away with all the other small dismissals that had been quietly accumulating for years. I didn't see the pattern yet, or maybe I did and I just wasn't ready to admit what it meant. The signs got harder to ignore as my father's health improved and Renee's behavior kept shifting. The warmth from those early dinners had evaporated, replaced by something colder, more transactional. She stopped asking about my work unless other people were around to hear the answer. She stopped thanking me for anything unless it was staged for an audience. I made full colonel at 45 after leading a complex logistics operation during a humanitarian relief effort that required 72 straight hours of coordination across 4 time zones. It was, by any honest measure, the hardest and proudest professional accomplishment of my career to that point. My father called the night the news came through, his voice thick with something he didn't know how to name. "Your mother would be proud," he said. Renee's reaction was different. She posted about it online before I told most of my friends, tagging me in a long paragraph about our family's success, about how she'd always known Sarah would go far. The comments poured in, congratulations aimed as much at her as at me, and she answered every single one, basking in the reflected light of a promotion she had nothing to do with. Her questions about my personal life grew sharper. Why wasn't I married? Why had I chosen work over family? Why didn't I visit more? Each one carried an implication underneath it, a suggestion that my priorities were wrong, that I was failing at the parts of life that supposedly mattered more than a uniform. "You're so focused on rank," she said once during a conversation I hadn't invited, "but what are you actually building outside of that?" I didn't answer. I was building trust. Competence. The kind of leadership that keeps soldiers alive, but explaining that to her felt pointless. She'd already decided what my life meant, and nothing I said was going to move that decision. She started correcting me in front of others, how I loaded the dishwasher, how I parked in the driveway, how I folded towels. Small things delivered with a smile, each one a paper cut that meant nothing alone and everything together. My father noticed. I could see it in the way he'd change the subject when Renee started in on me, the way he'd suddenly need help in the garage just to get me out of the room. But he never said anything directly. He was trying to keep peace in his own house, caught between the daughter he'd raised and the woman he'd chosen, and I understood that better than I let on. It was around this time that I got closer to Grace Ibarra. Grace and I had gone through the officer basic course together decades earlier, then lost touch, the way people do across duty stations, until we ended up assigned to the same post again the year I made colonel. She'd gone the JAG route, military law, and had a way of cutting straight through nonsense that I found myself craving more and more as the noise at home got louder. We started having dinner every couple of weeks, and somewhere in one of those dinners, half joking over takeout, she told me about a case she'd just closed involving a civilian spouse who'd forged signatures on a service member's benefits paperwork. "People think because it happens in a family, it doesn't count as a real offense," Grace said, twirling noodles onto her fork. "It counts. Civilians don't get a free pass just because they're standing next to a uniform." I laughed at the time, a small, easy, and told her she made everything sound like a courtroom drama. I had no idea how many times I'd think back on that conversation in the months to come. I started visiting less, not dramatically, just gradually, finding reasons to stay on post during long weekends, volunteering for extra duty that kept me occupied elsewhere. It was easier than sitting in that house absorbing small humiliations while pretending everything was fine. Renee's social circle became her whole world. She hosted dinners, organized the church fundraiser committee, positioned herself as a central figure among people who valued appearances over substance. She thrived there, in a place where surface-level charm mattered more than honesty. I heard through my father that she'd started implying to people that I was difficult. Not directly, never overtly. Just a sigh when my name came up, a comment about how busy I always was, how I never had time for family anymore. She painted herself as the patient stepmother managing a daughter who'd grown cold. I heard about it secondhand from my aunt, who'd attended one of Renee's gatherings and mentioned it without realizing how it would land. She said you don't visit much anymore, my aunt told me. Said she's worried about you. Worried. As if my absence were the problem and not the house I no longer wanted to sit in. The breaking point started building the week I stopped by in uniform, straight from a change of command ceremony. Renee looked at my ribbons and frowned. "It's a lot," she said. "You look like you're trying to show off." "This is the regulation uniform, Renee." "I know. I'm just saying, people might think you're being arrogant." My father set his coffee cup down hard enough that the liquid jumped over the rim. "Renee!" She turned to him, expression all innocence. "What? I'm just being honest." I left the room before I said something I couldn't take back. The comments about the pin came up again not long after, at a birthday dinner for my father, when I made the mistake of wearing it. Renee mentioned it to one of her friends while I was standing right there saying she'd tried to suggest I not wear it because it gives the wrong impression. The friend glanced at me, clearly uncomfortable, unsure how to respond. "It was my great-grandmother's," I said evenly. Renee smiled, the kind of smile that has teeth in it somewhere. "I know, sweetheart. I'm just thinking about how it looks to other people." The word sweetheart hung in the air with all its condescension. I realized, sitting at that table, that Renee had been quietly building a case against me for years. Every small comment, every rewritten memory, was a brick in a wall she was constructing. The difficult stepdaughter, too, career-obsessed to be part of the family, needing Renee's guidance and patience to become someone worth loving. And I had let her build it, brick by brick, because I didn't want to burden my father with conflict. I started keeping a mental distance after that dinner, polite, functional, present when required. But I stopped offering more than the minimum. I stopped helping financially unless my father asked directly. I stopped rearranging my leave for last-minute requests. Renee noticed, and she did not like it. Something in her had decided, long before that night at the gala, that my restraint was weakness and that my patience was something she could keep testing without consequence. The gala was held on a Saturday evening in early October at a hotel ballroom downtown, a fundraiser supporting a regional veterans transition program, job placement housing assistance, mental health services for soldiers coming home to nothing waiting for them. I'd been invited as a guest of honor alongside several other senior officers being recognized for their contributions to the cause. My father was thrilled to attend. Renee insisted on coming too, and spent 2 weeks talking about what she'd wear, who might be there, how prestigious it would look to be associated with an event like that. I wore a simple black dress, tailored but not flashy. And at my shoulder, I'd pinned the silver star lapel button, my great-grandmother's gift, my grandfather's sacrifice worn that particular night because October 11th was the anniversary of the day he died, and I had never once let that date pass without carrying some small piece of him with me. We arrived just after 7. The ballroom was already filling with active-duty personnel, veterans in blazers with their own careful rows of ribbons, civilians connected to the cause. I recognized faces, exchanged handshakes, introduced my father to colleagues who'd heard me mention him over the years. He was proud and a little uncomfortable in his good suit, standing straighter than I'd seen him stand in months, shaking hands with genuine warmth. Renee stayed close, cataloging the room, positioning herself for photographs, introducing herself as my stepmother to anyone who'd listen. She laughed too loudly at jokes she didn't quite understand and kept a possessive hand on my father's arm whenever someone paid him too much attention. I was mid-conversation with a Navy captain about inter-service logistics when Renee approached. She waited until he stepped away, then moved close, her voice low and sharp in a way I hadn't heard from her before. "Where did you get that?" she asked. I looked at her, confused. "Get what?" She gestured at the pin on my shoulder. "That. Don't tell me you bought something like that on your salary." The accusation landed like a slap. "It was my great-grandmother's, Renee. I've told you that before." "That's not what it looks like." Her eyes locked onto the pin, her expression hardening into something I hadn't seen from her before. "You stole this." The words came out quiet, but the venom in them was unmistakable. I froze. Around us, the gala kept going, voices and laughter blending into background noise, oblivious. Renee's hand moved toward the pin, her fingers closing around it. "You're too poor to be wearing something like this," she hissed and pulled. The pin dug hard into the fabric of my dress, the sudden pressure wrenching my shoulder forward. I stepped back to create distance, but her grip tightened, and for one surreal moment I understood she was actually trying to rip it off me, in the middle of a ballroom full of military personnel and veterans. In front of colleagues, in front of my father. A hand closed around her wrist. Renee gasped, her grip releasing as someone gently but firmly pulled her hand away from my dress. I looked up and saw an older man, 70-something, leaning on a cane with one hand while holding Renee's wrist with the other. He wore a simple dark suit, a single row of ribbons on his lapel, and the unmistakable bearing of someone who had spent 30 years in uniform and never fully set it down. I would learn later that his name was Walter Boone, a retired command sergeant major who'd served 3 combat tours and now volunteered full-time with the same veterans program the Gala was raising money for. He looked at Renee, his voice calm but carrying weight that seemed to still the space around us. "Ma'am," he said, "that's a silver star lapel button. I'd put it down if I were you." The room didn't go fully silent, but I felt the shift, people nearby turning, picking up on the tension, a tension gathering like static before a storm. Renee's face went pale. She tried to pull her hand back, but Boone held firm another second before letting go. "Do you have any idea what that represents?" he added. Quieter now, but somehow louder for it. Renee stepped back, her expression cycling through shock, confusion, something close to panic. She looked at me, at the pin, at the small crowd that had started to gather, trying to piece together what had just happened and how badly it had gone. My father appeared at my side, his face flushed with something that wasn't embarrassment for me. It was shame. For her. Renee opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't." "You didn't know," I said quietly. "That's clear." She looked at my father, searching for support, for someone to tell her this was all a simple misunderstanding. But he didn't move. He stood next to me, solid and silent, and I felt years of quiet loyalty finally reassert themselves in the set of his shoulders. Before Renee could say anything else, a woman in a dark blazer with an event security badge stepped in from the edge of the room. She'd clearly seen at least part of what happened. "Ma'am, sir, I need to speak with both of you for just a moment," she said, professional and even. "We do have to document physical altercations at events like this for insurance and liability purposes. It won't take long." Renee's face drained further. "This isn't necessary. It was a misunderstanding." "I understand it may feel that way," the security officer said, "but I still need a brief statement from both parties." She looked at me. "Ma'am, would you like to file anything further, or just have this on record?" I thought about it for exactly as long as it took to breathe once. Grace's voice from that dinner months earlier echoed somewhere in the back of my mind. Civilians don't get a free pass just because they're standing next to a uniform. But I looked at my father's face, at the exhaustion already written there, and I made my choice. "Just on record," I said. "I don't want to press anything further tonight." The officer nodded, made a few notes, took both our names, and stepped back to let the moment dissolve into the crowd the way these things eventually do. I didn't know it yet, but that single incident report, 3 sentences on a clipboard, my name, Renee's name, a description of what had occurred, would exist quietly in a database for years, waiting. Renee turned and walked toward the exit without another word. A few people watched her go. Most returned to their conversations, the way people do when the spectacle passes and normal life reclaims the room. But it wasn't the scene itself that hurt worst. It was the instinct behind it. The immediate, ugly assumption that anything of value on me couldn't possibly be mine. That I must have stolen it, because in Renee's mind, I was always somehow less. Too ordinary. Too much of a pretender to have earned something that mattered. I stood there, the pin still crooked on my dress from where she pulled it, my shoulder aching, my chest tight. My father touched my arm gently. "I'm sorry," he said. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. The gala continued around us, but I'd stopped being present in it. I stayed another hour because leaving immediately would only have made the moment bigger than it needed to be. I smiled when required, answered congratulations for an award I barely registered receiving. But something had broken loose inside me, not my resolve, but the last of a belief I'd carried too long, that staying quiet, absorbing disrespect, keeping the peace at any cost, had ever been worth what it cost me. I stepped outside 20 minutes later, needing air, needing distance from the lights, and the careful, uncertain smiles of people who'd witnessed the scene and didn't know what to say about it. The parking lot was cool and mostly empty. I leaned against the brick wall near the entrance and just breathed, studying an anger that had been building quietly for years and had finally found a shape. The door opened behind me. I expected my father, but it was Walter Boone. "I hope I didn't overstep," he said, moving carefully, his cane tapping the pavement. "I don't usually go around grabbing people's wrists." I shook my head. "You didn't overstep. Thank you." He nodded, seemed satisfied, started to turn away. Then he paused. "For what it's worth," he said, "I served near a man who knew your grandfather's unit. Korea, 1951. The position they were holding got overrun in the night. Your grandfather went back out twice for wounded men before he took a round himself. Didn't die that night, but I understand he was never really whole again after." "How did you know all that?" "I didn't, not really, until I saw the pin catch the light. That particular star setting, that ribbon pattern. Men who've spent a lifetime around these things learn to recognize them the way you'd recognize a friend's handwriting." He glanced back toward the door. "Some people see a piece of metal and think it's jewelry. Others see what it costs to earn it." He left before I could ask him anything else. My father came out a few minutes later, looking older than I'd seen him look in years. He didn't apologize again. He just stood beside me, hands in his pockets, staring at the parking lot. "She crossed a line tonight," he said finally. "Yeah. I should have said something a long time ago. All those little comments, the way she talked to you. I told myself if I ignored it, it would stop." "It's not your fault. Part of it is." He looked at me. "She made you feel small in my house, and I let her." I didn't argue with him, because he wasn't wrong. We stood there a while longer in the kind of silence we'd always been comfortable with, the kind that didn't need filling. Inside, the Gala shifted into its social hour, music starting up faintly through the walls. "I'm going to head out," I said. He nodded. "I'll deal with Renee." "You don't have to." "I do." His voice was firm, the tone he used to use when I was young and needed to understand something wasn't negotiable. "This isn't yours to fix." I drove back to post alone, the pin still crooked on my dress, my shoulder aching where she'd grabbed it. I didn't cry. What I felt instead was something closer to clarity, the kind that arises when a situation you've been avoiding finally forces itself into full focus, all at once, and refuses to let you look away again. Over the following days, I found myself reviewing everything, not obsessively, not to build a case, just methodically, the way I'd review an after-action report. The money I'd given over the years, the medical bills, the roof, the transmission, the emergencies that always seemed to surface right when my account was healthy, the leave I'd rearranged, the plans I'd canceled, the times I'd prioritized their needs over my own rest. Renee's small cruelties, each one harmless enough alone, corrosive together. The way she'd rewritten histories, claimed credit for support she'd never provided, positioned herself as central to accomplishments she had nothing to do with. I realized I'd spent years overfunctioning, compensating for her lack of real contribution by contributing more myself, absorbing her disrespect, because confronting it would have meant conflict, and conflict would have hurt my father. But staying quiet had hurt him too. It had taught Renee she could treat me however she wanted as long as she was careful about the audience. Grace showed up at my office 3 days later, closing the door behind her without waiting to be asked. "I heard about the gala," she said. "Word travels fast in this community, especially when it involves a silver star and a scene." "I'm fine." "I know you are. That's not why I'm here." She sat across from my desk, arms crossed, all business now, legally speaking, and I'm telling you this as a friend first, an attorney second. What she did could constitute simple assault under state law. Grabbing you, causing injury, however minor, and the accusation she made, loudly, in front of witnesses, calling you a thief? Depending on how it spread afterward, that edges toward defamation. She's a civilian. UCMJ doesn't touch her. But the civilian courts absolutely would if you wanted to go that route. I don't. I figured. I'm not here to push you toward it. I'm here because I want you to understand you have the option. And having the option matters even if you never use it. She leaned forward slightly. You already have an incident report on file from that security team. That alone means something exists on paper, regardless of what you decide to do next. I thought about that for a long moment. I don't want revenge, Grace. I know. This isn't about revenge. It's about you understanding you're not powerless in this, even if the way you choose to use that power is silence. She softened. My grandmother used to say people tell you exactly who they are by how they treat the things you can't afford to lose. Renee thought you couldn't afford to lose your father's approval, so she felt safe disrespecting you, certain you'd tolerate almost anything to protect that relationship. I looked at her. She's wrong. I know she is. You've been living without needing anyone's approval for 27 years of service. What you can't live without is your own self-respect. And that's the thing she never understood she was gambling with. 2 days later, I called my father and asked if we could meet, not at the house, somewhere neutral. He suggested the diner we used to stop at when I was in high school, Vinyl Boots, coffee that always tasted like it had been sitting on the burner too long. He was already there when I arrived, hands wrapped around a mug, and I saw the weariness in his face, the knowledge that this conversation wasn't going to be easy for either of us. I sat across from him. A waitress brought coffee without asking. We waited until she left. Renee's staying with her sister, my father said. Since the gala, I didn't ask her to leave. I told her she needed space to think about what she did. What's she saying? That she was stressed, that the lighting was bad, that your dress made the pin catch the light wrong. He shook his head. Everything except an actual apology. I wasn't surprised. I need to tell you something and I need you to hear it without defending her. He nodded. Renee doesn't respect me. She hasn't for a long time. The gala wasn't a one-time thing. It was the end result of years of small dismissals, casual cruelties, comments designed to make me feel like less. I kept my voice level, factual. She's rewritten history to take credit for things she didn't do. She's used my rank for social currency while resenting me for having it. I tolerated it because I didn't want to put you in the middle. I didn't want to make you choose between us. His jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. What happened at the gala made me understand something, I continued. By staying quiet all those years, I taught her my boundaries didn't matter, that she could treat me however she wanted as long as she was careful about it. I'm not doing that anymore. What are you saying exactly? I'm saying Renee doesn't get access to me anymore. Not my time, not my money, not my patience. She doesn't get to attend military functions with me. She doesn't get to introduce me as her stepdaughter while quietly undermining me at the same time. I looked at him directly. I'm not cutting you out, Dad, but I'm drawing a hard line with her, and it isn't negotiable. He was quiet a long time, and I could see him weighing loyalties, searching for a middle path that simply didn't exist. She's going to say you're overreacting, he said finally. She's going to blame the army, say it's made you cold. I know. And she's going to try to guilt you into fixing it. I know that too. He looked at me. I don't think she knows how to actually apologize. Not really. Then we have a problem. We sat in the diner's noise for a while, my father carrying the weight of a situation he hadn't created but couldn't escape. I'm sorry, he said eventually, for not seeing it sooner, for letting her treat you that way in my own house. I know you are. What do you need from me? I need you to stop smoothing this over. I need you to let her sit with the consequences of what she did instead of protecting her from them. I paused. And Wheelons, I need you to know that no matter what happens between me and Renee, you and I are solid. That part doesn't change. Relief moved across his face so visibly it made my chest ache. He'd been afraid of losing me. I could see that clearly now. The fear that had kept him quiet for years, that had made him tolerate Renee's behavior rather than risk a conflict that might drive me away. He'd had it backward the whole time. The risk was never in confronting her. The risk was in letting her continue unchecked until the damage became something that couldn't be undone. Renee called 2 days later. I let it go to voicemail. Her message hit every note of practiced hurt. I don't understand why you're upset. I made a mistake. Can we please talk about this like adults? The framing was perfect. I was the unreasonable one. She was the mature one reaching out. I deleted it. She tried again by text a few days after that, a long paragraph about stress, about misunderstandings, about how much she valued our relationship. Not one word acknowledging what she'd actually done. Not one word of real accountability. Her friends started reaching out too, people I barely knew, sending messages about how Renee was really struggling and didn't understand what went wrong, positioning themselves as mediators, people who could bridge the gap if I'd just meet her halfway. I told each of them the same thing. This was between me and Renee, and I wasn't interested in discussing it with third parties. One pushed back, said I was being harsh, that families work through things. I blocked her number. Meanwhile, a version of the story started circulating through Renee's circle, that she'd been humiliated at a military event by her stepdaughter, that some veteran had grabbed her wrist over a simple misunderstanding, that she was the victim of military arrogance from a woman whose career had gone to her head. I heard it through my aunt, who called me furious on my behalf, asking if I wanted her to correct the record. No, I said, let her tell whatever story she needs to tell. The people who matter know the truth. She's making you look bad to people who don't even know you. I can live with that. And the truth was, I could. The truth was simpler than Renee wanted to admit anyway. She'd grabbed something valuable off my dress in public, accused me of theft, and been corrected by a stranger who understood what she didn't. Everything after that was consequence, not punishment. But acknowledging that would have required her to accept responsibility, and based on every message, every third-party plea, every retold story, that wasn't something she was capable of. So the boundary stayed exactly where I'd set it. 3 months passed. Renee stopped calling. The messages from her circle tapered off, then stopped entirely. My father mentioned her occasionally, updates delivered in careful, neutral tones designed not to pressure me one way or another. She was still at her sister's. She was looking for her own place. She was thinking about a fresh start somewhere new. How are you doing with all of it? I asked him during one of our weekly calls. Tired, he admitted, but better. The house is quieter. I knew exactly what he meant. Not the absence of noise, but the absence of tension, the low-level vigilance that comes from managing someone else's moods, walking carefully to avoid triggering criticism, performing emotional labor that never got reciprocated. Without Renee's constant demands, spoken and unspoken, my father had started rebuilding small routines he'd let slip away. He rejoined his veterans coffee group, something Renee used to complain about because it took time from projects she wanted done around the house. He started fixing up an old motorcycle in the garage again, something he hadn't touched in years. I didn't realize how much I'd given up, he told me one evening. Little things. But they add up. I understood completely. I'd given things up too. Peace of mind, boundaries, the assumption that showing up for family meant being treated with basic respect. For my part, life had genuinely simplified. Without the emotional preparation required to navigate Renee's moods, I found I had bandwidth I'd forgotten I had. I slept better. I worked with a clearer head. I spent time with friends without the low hum of guilt telling me I should be visiting my father instead. The irony wasn't lost on me. Cutting Renee out had made my relationship with my father stronger. We talked more, and the conversations carried less weight because they weren't happening under her watchful management. He asked better questions about my work, listened more carefully, seemed genuinely curious about the life I'd built instead of viewing it through Renee's lens of career-obsessed absence. I made Brigadier General that same fall, at 49, after a promotion board that had been years in the making. The notification came through official channels first, then a call from my commanding general, then a flood of messages from colleagues who'd heard before I'd fully processed it myself. I called my father immediately. He picked up on the second ring. 1 star, I said. The silence on his end lasted just long enough for me to worry. Then, your mother would be so proud. Yeah, I am too. I hope you know that. I do. He asked about the timeline, the new assignment, what it would mean for my schedule. Normal questions, the kind that showed he was paying attention, that he understood what this meant beyond the rank itself. Renee's going to hear about it, he said eventually. She'll probably want to reach out. Take credit maybe, I don't know. She can want whatever she wants. Doesn't mean I have to respond. He was quiet a moment. You've gotten harder. No, I said. I've just stopped pretending boundaries are negotiable. Another pause, warmer this time. I like this version of you. Calmer. He was right. I was calmer. The constant, low-level anxiety of managing Renee's reactions, of keeping the peace, of being enough, all of it had lifted the moment I stopped trying to earn something that was never actually available to earn. The official pinning ceremony was small, held at post headquarters with a handful of senior officers and my closest team. My father made the 4-hour drive without complaint, stood in the front row while the stars were pinned to my shoulders, his eyes wet the entire time. Renee didn't come. I hadn't invited her. He hadn't asked if he should. Afterward, we had dinner at a quiet restaurant off post. Just the two of us, the way it used to be before Renee entered the picture. We talked about the new assignment, about his motorcycle project, about nothing important and everything that mattered. Have you heard from her? I asked, not because I wanted to reopen anything, but because I was curious where things stood. She called a few weeks ago, asked if I'd talk to you about reconciliation. What did you say? That it wasn't my place. That if she wanted to fix things, she needed to talk to you directly and actually apologize instead of explain. How'd she take that? He smiled slightly. Not well. Said I was choosing you over her. You told her that's not how it works. I did. Told her I'm not choosing anyone. I'm just done running interference. He looked at me across the table. She didn't like that. She wouldn't. Renee called again in late November. I saw her name on my phone and hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, part of me wanting to let it ring through to voicemail like every time before. But something made me answer. Sarah. Her voice was careful, measured. Thank you for picking up. What do you need, Renee? I'd like to talk in person, clear the air. I almost laughed. The air's pretty clear from where I'm standing. Please, just coffee, one conversation. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Not because I thought anything would change, but because I wanted to see whether she'd actually use the word sorry or whether she'd keep explaining without ever apologizing. We met at a cafe halfway between Post and my father's house. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, hands wrapped around a cup she probably wasn't drinking. She'd lost weight, looked older, more tired. The polished veneer she used to wear so easily had cracked at the edges. I sat across from her and waited. I wanted to apologize, she started, for what happened at the gala, and for everything leading up to it. It was a decent opening, almost believable. Okay, I said. She seemed thrown by the lack of reaction. I've had time to think, to reflect on my behavior. I realize I wasn't always fair to you. Not always fair felt like a significant understatement, but I let her continue. I think things got out of hand. Tensions built up over the years. We both said and did things we regret. And there it was. The pivot. The suggestion that this had been mutual, that we'd each contributed equally to the breakdown. What did I do? I asked quietly. She blinked. What? You said we both did things we regret. What did I do that you think I should regret? Well, you became distant. You stopped helping. You shut me out. I set boundaries after years of disrespect. That's not the same thing as what you did. Her expression hardened slightly. This is exactly the problem. You're so rigid, so black and white, you can't see how your military mindset. Stop. I kept my voice level. You asked for this conversation. If you're going to spend it blaming my career, explaining why your behavior wasn't that bad, or suggesting I'm too sensitive, we're done here. She sat back, visibly realizing she'd miscalculated. I'm trying to apologize. No, you're trying to get back to normal without doing the work of actually acknowledging what you did. I leaned forward slightly. You grabbed something off my dress in public. You accused me of theft. You tried to rip a family heirloom off me because you couldn't believe I'd earned the right to wear it. And in the months since, you've told everyone who'd listen that I'm the problem. I was stressed. I don't care. Stress doesn't make you grab people. It doesn't make you cruel. You made choices, multiple choices over years, to treat me like I was less than. And when someone finally stopped you, when you faced a small consequence for your behavior, you blamed everyone but yourself. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Her eyes were wet, but I couldn't tell if the tears were genuine or tactical, and honestly, it no longer mattered to me which. I know you want things to go back to the way they were, I continued, but there is no going back. There's only forward. And going forward requires you to actually change your behavior, not just explain why it wasn't your fault. You're asking me to grovel. I'm asking you to be honest with yourself, if not with me. Renee shook her head slowly. You've changed. You used to be softer. I used to mistake endurance for love. I don't anymore. She stood, gathering her things with jerky, irritated movements. I tried. I came here. I apologized. I offered to fix things. If that's not good enough for you, I don't know what else you want. I want you to actually mean it, but I don't think you know how. She left without another word, the cafe door swinging hard behind her. I sat there a few more minutes, finishing coffee I barely touched, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest that came from confrontation, but underneath it, something else. Relief. I'd held the boundary. I hadn't bent, hadn't softened, hadn't let her guilt or tears or carefully worded non-apology move me an inch. When I called my father later, he asked how it went. "About like you'd expect," I said. "Did she tell you I forced her to call me?" "No. She's been saying I'm too hard on her, that I've changed since our problems started." He sighed. "Maybe you have, but not in the way she means." "What way do you mean?" "You stopped pretending you didn't see what was happening." "That's not the same as changing. That's just being honest." I understood exactly what he meant. Over the following weeks, Renee's presence in my father's life faded to almost nothing. She moved 2 states away, took a job managing the front office of a boutique hotel chain. My father heard about it secondhand, through mutual acquaintances. She didn't tell him herself. He seemed okay with that. Not happy, not celebratory, just okay. "I tried," he said one evening. "I wanted it to work, but I couldn't keep pretending her behavior was acceptable just to keep her around." "I'm proud of you for that." "Yeah, me too." The holidays came and went, quieter than they'd been in years, and better for it. My father and I spent Thanksgiving together, just the two of us, cooking too much food and watching football, and it felt like coming home to something I'd forgotten still existed. Simplicity, ease, the total absence of performance. Christmas was even quieter. I sent Renee a card, polite and impersonal, the kind of gesture you make to acknowledge someone's existence without inviting them back into your life. She didn't respond. I didn't expect her to. The trust I'd lost hadn't really been with her, I realized. It had been with myself. Trust that I could hold a boundary. Trust that I deserved respect and not just tolerance. Trust that protecting myself wasn't selfish but necessary. Slowly, carefully, I built that trust back. Almost a year after the gala, I got a call from an unfamiliar number with a Midwest area code. It was the hiring coordinator from a hospitality management company, following up on a background check for a candidate who'd listed me as a professional reference for character purposes. A strange, almost bureaucratic footnote to everything that had happened. Renee had listed my father, actually, and somewhere in the paperwork trail, my name had come up too, connected loosely due the incident report on file from that night at the gala. The coordinator wasn't asking me to say anything negative. She simply needed to confirm certain facts already flagged in the file. A documented public incident involving physical contact and a false accusation resolved without formal charges. I confirmed only what was already true and already on record. I didn't editorialize. I didn't need to. The truth quietly filed away on a clipboard nearly a year earlier was doing exactly what the truth tends to do when you leave it alone long enough. Simply existing, available to whoever needed to find it, without me having to lift a finger to make it matter. I never learned whether Renee got that position. I didn't ask, and my father didn't offer. It wasn't revenge, and it never felt like revenge, even in that moment. It was just the natural weight of consequence, finally landing where it had always been headed, long after I'd stopped watching for it. Winter turned to spring. My new assignment as Brigadier General came with responsibilities that stretched me in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. Strategic planning, high-level coordination, decisions that touched thousands of soldiers and hundreds of millions in resources. The work was demanding, but it felt right, felt earned, the product of decades of competence and the kind of sustained, unglamorous excellence that doesn't happen by accident. My father started visiting more, making the drive up just to see where I worked, to meet the people I led, to understand the actual scope of what I did. Renee had never once asked those questions with real curiosity. She wanted the status of the relationship without the substance of it, the ability to say her stepdaughter was a general without ever caring what that meant day to day. My father cared. He asked, he listened, he took quiet pride in the work itself, without ever making it about him. 15 years passed the way. Years do, quickly, in memory, slowly, in the living of them. I made Major General, then Lieutenant General, 3 stars settling onto shoulders that had carried a great deal by then. My father, 80 now, had slowed but not stopped. He still tinkered in the garage on good days. We talked every week without fail, visited when we could, and the bond we'd rebuilt in the wake of Renee's exit from our lives had only grown steadier with time. I hadn't thought about her in years, not consciously anyway. She'd become a footnote, a difficult chapter that had taught me something important but no longer occupied any real space in my mind. I'd heard through the same distant channels information like that always travels, that she'd remarried, moved further south, built a different life entirely. Good for her, I remember thinking. I meant it. The occasion was a promotion ceremony at a post in Virginia, formal, well-attended, the kind of event where the reception afterward runs long with handshakes and photographs and people I barely knew wanting a moment of my time. My father had flown in the day before, moving slower than he used to, but still sharp, still steady, standing at my side through the whole thing with visible pride. A young captain approached partway through the reception, hesitant but determined. "Ma'am, there's someone at the door asking to speak with you. She says she's family." My stomach tightened reflexively. "Who? A Renee Calloway, ma'am. Said she used to be your stepmother." I looked across the room and found her near the entrance. Older, obviously, silver-haired now, her face lined in ways that suggested hard years rather than graceful ones. She stood clutching a small purse, looking simultaneously defiant and uncertain, the way people look when they've spent a long drive rehearsing something they're no longer sure they have the nerve to say. My father appeared at my elbow. "I didn't know she'd be here." "Neither did I. You don't have to talk to her." "I know." But curiosity pulled me forward, not hope for reconciliation. That particular door had closed a long time ago, but genuine curiosity about what could bring someone back after 15 years of silence. I crossed the room. Renee saw me coming and straightened, trying to summon some remnant of the confidence she used to wear so easily. "Sarah, congratulations. 3 stars. That's remarkable." "Thank you. What are you doing here, Renee?" "I saw the announcement online. I wanted to see you, to tell you I'm proud." She paused, and to apologize. Really apologize this time, not the way I tried before. I studied her face looking for the manipulation I'd once learned to recognize so well, but what I found instead was something closer to plain resignation, not redemption exactly, just the tiredness of someone who'd finally run out of road to walk down. "It's been 15 years, I said quietly. "I know. I needed that long to actually understand what I did wrong, what I kept doing wrong even after you tried to tell me." She glanced at my father, who'd followed a few steps behind. "I hurt both of you. I made everything about me, about my image, about what I needed, and I lost the only family that mattered because of it." I didn't respond right away. Around us, the reception continued, background noise giving me a little room to think. "I don't need you to forgive me," Renee continued. "I'm not asking for that. I just wanted you to know I finally understand you were right. That I spent years blaming you for setting boundaries, when I should have been grateful you were honest enough to set them at all." My father's hand touched my elbow gently. A question, not a directive. "I appreciate you saying that," I told her, and I meant it more than I expected to. "I do, but 15 years is a long time. We've both built entirely different lives." "I know. I'm not asking to be part of yours." She managed a small, sad smile. "I just wanted to see you succeed. To know you made it here despite me, not because of anything I did, and to say I'm sorry I ever tried to take that away from you." She turned to leave, then paused. "The pin. The one I grabbed. Do you still have it?" "Yes." "Good. It belongs with you." "It always did." She walked away, disappearing into the crowd and then out the door. I stood there, my father beside me, processing the unexpected weight of the last few minutes. "How do you feel?" he asked. Honestly, I felt fine. Not victorious, not vindicated, just settled. She said what she needed to say. I heard it. "It doesn't change anything. We're still done." "Good." He squeezed my arm. "Now let's go enjoy your accomplishment. You earned every bit of it." We rejoined the reception, and I didn't look back, not out of coldness, but because there was genuinely nothing behind me left to check on. The pin was at home, in a small case on my desk, exactly where I'd left it. I take it out sometimes, hold it carefully, think about the man who earned it and never fully came home from what it cost him. About the weight of that sacrifice, the way it rippled quietly through 4 generations of women who wore it without ever needing to explain themselves. Renee had looked at a piece of metal that day and assumed theft because she'd never once considered that I might have simply been given something precious by people who loved me. And that being given something doesn't make you undeserving of it. She was wrong about the pin. She was wrong about almost everything, honestly. I'd earned my place in this uniform through decades of work, through consistent leadership, through the kind of sustained excellence that doesn't happen by accident or through someone else's efforts. And I earned my peace the same way, by setting boundaries, by refusing to participate in my own diminishment, by choosing dignity over the false comfort of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. The lesson that took me longest to learn, the one I'd pass on to anyone willing to hear it, is this: you don't owe anyone access to your life simply because they want it. Access is earned. Trust is built slowly and can be spent all at once. Respect isn't optional, and it isn't negotiable, no matter how close the relationship. When someone shows you through consistent behavior that they're incapable of offering those things, when they grab for what isn't theirs, when they minimize your worth, when they rewrite your history to center themselves in it, you have every right to walk away, not with anger, not with vindictiveness, just with clarity. Sometimes the peace you're searching for starts the exact moment you stop apologizing for protecting yourself. And sometimes the greatest act of strength a person can offer isn't in what they endure, but in knowing precisely when they're done carrying someone else's weight for them. I was done, and I have never once, in 15 years, regretted putting it down. Thanks for sticking with me through this one. I want to hear from you now. Have you ever had someone underestimate you so badly it changed the entire shape of a relationship? Have you ever had to pull back, set a real boundary, or walk away from someone who kept taking you for granted? Drop your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I promise you, whatever you went through, someone else reading this needs to hear that they're not alone in it either. And if this resonated with you tonight, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs the reminder that their worth was never up for someone else's debate. I'll see you in the next one.